Hello, I'm Dr. William Schlosser. You know me as an economist. You may also know me as an ecologist. But more than anything, you're going to know me as an educator. I'm Dr. Bill, and I welcome you to my classroom. Welcome to our exploration of long-term economic growth. In this presentation, I'll delve into the dynamic world of economic development, examining how countries harness technology, innovation, and policy to foster sustainable growth. We'll uncover the driving forces behind the rise of renewable energy, the global expansion of advanced manufacturing, and the pivotal role of government policies in shaping our economic future. As we journey through historical milestones and contemporary advancements, we'll see how nations like China, Australia, and the United States are leading the way in renewable energy adoption and technological innovation. From solar panel installation to electric vehicles and cutting-edge battery technology, the future of economic growth is not only promising, but also imperative for our global sustainability. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of economic growth, learn from the past, and envision the prosperous and sustainable world of tomorrow.
When it comes to solar power, China is outpacing everyone. Last year, it commissioned as much solar energy as the entire world did in 2022.
The driving that China has done the clean energy economy actually has been really beneficial.
Not everyone sees it that way, though. The US, the EU, and other countries are desperate to protect their markets and stay competitive, and placing limits on tariff-free imports. So how did China become so unbeatable? And is that a bad thing? We'll start in Bittefeld-Wolfen, Germany, where Swiss solar panel manufacturer Meyer Burger makes some of its products. The company is a leading manufacturer of solar cells and modules. It employs over 1,000 people. But it's having a bit of a crisis. Lately, it's had to confront the challenges of manufacturing in Europe, where energy and production costs have risen significantly, making it difficult to turn a profit. The Chinese solar modules flooding the market are cheaper and in some cases more efficient, a reality that has pushed several European manufacturers into bankruptcy. And yet, by the end of the year, a new Meyer Burger factory is slated to be up and running. But it won't be in this German town of roughly 40,000 people. It'll be in Colorado Springs, USA. China gets so far ahead. Well, in the early 2000s, the country was experiencing a severe shortage of one of the main raw materials needed to make solar panels: polysilicon. It was buying it from other countries at a very high price. So Beijing took action. Making polysilicon became a national priority. Local governments fast-tracked permission for the construction of new plants, and state-owned companies and banks poured money into the new facilities. And as a result, manufacturing capacity shot up. Here's how much, according to Chinese outlet PV Time, one of the many who track the growth. Government policy and heaps of state funding acted as a powerful sharpening steel to the country's competitive edge. China now controls 80 to 95% of the entire global solar production supply chain. Its tight grip on the supply chain has driven down prices and spurred innovation.
In economics, economic growth or economic growth theory typically refers to the growth of potential output, which is production at full employment. This assumes the country has an established economic structure, including rule of law, private property rights, and the financial infrastructure. In this chapter, we will consider the effects of different government policies in long-term economic growth. Economic growth, after all, is not inevitable. History has seen long periods of stagnations where no sustained increases in output per capita occurred. Why have some countries been able to achieve rapidly increasing real GDP per capita, while other countries have failed to keep pace? Our goal in this chapter is to develop a model of economic growth to help answer questions such as this. We will study the economic development process in the U.S. and through our trading partners, exploring the various factors and policies that influences long-term growth. No sustained economic growth occurred between 1 million BC and 1300 AD. Economist Brad DeLong estimates that in 1 million BC, our ancestors had a GDP per capita of approximately $145. He estimated that GDP per capita in 1300 AD was also about $145. In other words, no sustained economic growth occurred before the Middle Ages. A peasant on a farm in 1300 AD was about as well off as his ancestors. Significant growth did not begin until the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution refers to the application of mechanical power to the production of goods, beginning in England around 1750. Before that time, the production of goods had relied most exclusively on human or animal power. First England, then other countries, experienced long-run economic growth with sustained increases in real GDP per capita. The Industrial Revolution sprouted in response to the Glorious Revolution, also called the Bloodless Revolution of 1688 in England. The British king passed administrative control of the banking system and property rights control to the British Parliament. These events synergistically established the trend of economic growth in Europe. It started as small growth, but because of compounding, in the long run, small differences in economic growth rates result in big differences in living standards. The world's average annual growth rate of real GDP per capita in the period of 1800 to 1900 was about 1.3%, and equaled 2.3% from 1900 to 2000. The Bureau of Economic Analysis has estimated that the real gross domestic product, in 2009 prices, of the United States in 1929 was $1,055.6 billion. The Industrial Revolution and its subsequent spread through the world resulted in sustained increases in real GDP per capita. Growth rates matter because an economy that grows too slowly fails to raise living standards. In some countries in Africa and Asia, very little economic growth has occurred in the past 50 years, resulting in severe poverty. Remember the rule of 70 to apply a couple of growth rates, like 1.3% and 2.3%, to see the time needed to double the average standard of living in a country. Even a little rate increase makes substantial reductions in the time needed to double GDP per capita. The world can be divided into two groups: the high-income countries, or the industrial countries, and the poorer countries, or developing countries. The high-income countries include Western Europe, Australia, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, and the United States. The developing countries include most of the countries of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. In the 1980s and 1990s, a small group of countries, mostly East Asian countries, such as Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, experienced high growth rates and are referred to as the newly industrialized countries. Income equity between countries is often sought as developing nations grow and the gap between developed and developing countries widens. However, there are still underdeveloped countries that have not yet engaged in the globalization thrust. These differences are evident when comparing developed European countries like Germany to undeveloped sub-Saharan African countries. Disparities can also be seen within countries, such as between cultural groups in the USA and Canada. For instance, Aboriginal cultures often have different average incomes compared to other cultural origin groups. Despite these income disparities, significant advances in healthcare, education, and the rule of law have been made globally. These improvements, though not uniform or consistently applied, have generally raised living standards even in regions where income growth has lagged. The economic growth model aims to elucidate the growth rates in real GDP per capita over the long term. As discussed in the previous chapter, the linchpin of economic growth is labor productivity, defined as the quantity of goods and services that a single worker in 1 hour of work can produce. Two pivotal factors influence labor productivity. 1. The quantity of capital per hour worked. 2. The level of technology. Our economic growth model will focus primarily on these two elements, capital and technology. Technological change in this context refers to the increase in the amount of output a firm can generate using the given quantity of inputs. By understanding these factors, we can better grasp how economies grow and why some economies expand more rapidly than others. Technological change is a change in the quantity of output a firm can produce using a given quantity of inputs. There are three main sources of technological change. 1. Better machinery and equipment. 2. Increases in human capital, which is the accumulated knowledge and skills that workers acquire from educational training and from their life experiences. 3. Better means of organizing and managing production. A country's standard of living will be higher the more capital workers have available on their jobs. The better the capital, the more human capital workers have, and the better the job business managers can do when organizing production. This model of economic growth is more than just words. It is a foundational change to how you, an entrant into the professional job market, can enter the marketplace as someone who does more than just work faster and with increased accuracy. You can find ways to adopt different technologies into your personal production function. This concept is a game changer in many people's minds. Growth is not just about new technologies introduced by businesses into their operations. It requires employees knowing how to use technologies. I have seen companies that spend thousands of dollars to purchase geographic information system software, integrate servers and desktop computers with wide format printers so they could embrace the new technologies. But when it came time to deploy these spatial analysis tools in the workplace, they had one person able to run the software. This can create a bunker complex, where a wall is built around the staff member who would not release the data accumulated to co-workers or even to clients. When that worker finds other employment, the company is left without the human capital needed to leverage the expensive data into value for the company. In today's workforce, the debate between specialization and generalization is more relevant than ever. While focusing on a single specialty can lead to deep expertise, broadening your skill set to include multiple areas of knowledge can provide better flexibility and opportunity. This broad specialization requires more preparation but can result in more significant rewards, as it allows professionals to adapt to a variety of roles and challenges in the ever-changing job market. The economic growth model can be illustrated by using the per-worker production function, which describes the relationship between real GDP per hour worked and capital per hour worked, while holding the level of technology constant. Increases in the quantity of capital per hour worked result in movements up and along the per-worker production function. Holding technology constant, equal increases in the amount of capital per hour worked lead to diminishing returns, resulting in smaller increases in output per hour worked. Consider this line as a new entrant into the technology sector, starting in the lower left side of the chart. New skills are learned, techniques are refined, and the process of becoming more efficient is embraced. The worker moves along the line in a right and upward progression, which is indicative of the growth and success experienced as they enter and advance in the workforce. You can see this clearly for someone working at a job painting houses with brushes and rollers. The first house painted took a lot of time to get the use of the tools right. As more houses were completed, efficiency increased, and eventually the per-worker production function leveled out. Leveling out means simply that using the technologies available, Additional worker efficiency improvements are not likely. This is an example of diminishing returns. Technological change helps economies avoid diminishing returns to capital. It shifts up the per-worker production function, enabling an economy to produce more real output per hour worked with the same quantity of capital per hour worked. In the long run, a country will see an increasing standard of living only if it experiences continuous technological change and has human capital capable of adopting and using it. This slide is crucial for understanding how developing and developed countries can grow their economies differently, emphasizing the role of technological advancement in maintaining sustainable economic growth. This is where workers enhancing their personal production function are enabled. That house painter may consider using a spray applicator to speed the job, or different scaffolding devices to access the worksite. The painter may consider changes to the siding materials necessitating fewer layers of paint, or select a different compound to use when painting. Each technological change in the operation introduced a new production function the worker moved up to.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
As the Soviet Union grew rapidly from 1920 through the 1950s, it went through a process of adoption of new technologies. Some were deployed within the country, and others were brought from the USA and Europe. Because of an economic system of the USSR, employees were engaged through managed work programs, while entrepreneurs were stifled. Domestically created new technologies bypassed the Soviet system. The economy was anchored on crude oil and gas extraction to sell to Europe, where it was processed into usable products. Within the USSR, the raw national endowment of oil and gas were not produced into final products. No value added was enabled. Only a small portion of the nation's people were engaged in the industry, and the national government was the beneficiary of the proceeds from extraction. National emphasis on roads and bridges, electricity and clean water supplies was minimal. When oil and gas prices dropped in the 1980s and 90s, the Soviet Union became insolvent and collapsed. New growth theory, developed by Paul Romer, is a model of long-run economic growth, emphasizing that technological change is driven by economic incentives and determined by the market system. Unlike Robert Solow's model, which treated technological change as the result of change discoveries, Romer's theory suggests that firms and individuals can actively influence the rate of technological change through research and development. Romer argues that knowledge capital accumulates differently than physical capital. While individual firms may experience diminishing returns, the overall economy benefits from the increasing returns as knowledge spreads and compounds. The use of knowledge capital is non-rival because one firm's use of the knowledge does not prevent another firm from also using it. Romer points out that firms are unlikely to engage in research and development up to the point where the marginal cost of the research equals the marginal return from the knowledge gained, because other firms will gain much of the marginal return. Government policy plays a crucial role in enhancing the accumulation of knowledge capital. This is achieved in three primary ways. First, protecting intellectual property. Patents and copyrights provide exclusive rights to innovators, encouraging investment in new ideas by ensuring that investors can reap the benefits of their innovations. A patent grants the exclusive right to produce a new product for 20 years from the application date. Second, subsidizing research and development. By providing financial support for R&D, governments can stimulate innovation, helping firms to explore new technologies and solutions that might otherwise be too risky or costly to pursue. Third, subsidizing education. Investing in education increases human capital by equipping individuals with the knowledge and skills necessary to contribute to technological advancements and economic growth. These policies help mitigate the public good nature of knowledge capital, which often leads to underproduction in the private sector. By supporting these areas, government can help ensure that accumulation of knowledge capital is closer to the optimal level, fostering long-term economic growth and innovation. Research and development costs companies and individuals time and money. Not all R&D is funded by the government, and when it is articulated into a new product, the creators are protected by laws to ensure it. Patents and copyrights are fundamental protections bestowed on U.S. companies and residents. This enables creativity and allows innovators to benefit from their creations. Governments can play a crucial role in fostering research and development, R&D, by education to stimulate the economic growth. Subsidizing research and development, well, the government may directly perform research through agencies like NASA and the National Institutes of Health, or subsidize research at universities and other institutions. Additionally, tax incentives can encourage firms to invest in R&D. Subsidizing education. For effective R&D, a technically skilled workforce is essential. If firms bear the cost of training, they may offset this by offering lower wages, reducing job attractiveness. Hence, government subsidies for education, as seen in the high-income countries, can bridge the gap, ensuring a steady supply of well-trained professionals ready to drive technological advancements and economic growth. The New Growth Theory has revived interest in the ideas of Joseph Schumpeter, an Austrian-born economist who moved to the United States. Schumpeter emphasized that new products drive older products, and the firms that produce them out of the market. He called this process creative destruction. For example, the automobile replaced the horse-drawn carriage, better serving consumers' needs and rendering the carriage makers obsolete. Schumpeter believed that entrepreneurs are central to economic growth. Their profits provide the incentives to combine labor, capital, and natural resources in innovative ways, leading to the development of new products and raising the living standard. In my professional career, starting in forestry, I have been a proponent of technological changes necessitating workers to adopt their use. New technologies require people who understand their use and can implement them effectively. This was evident at the macro scale of timber extraction and at the micro scale as navigation in the forest evolved from using government-produced maps to employ GIS programs to model topographic lines, streams, and road networks. We progressed from printed maps to portable communication devices displaying topographic relief. Tools of the trade changed dramatically over the years. We moved from using the staff compass to handheld compasses, and from steel tape rolls to hip-mounted distance-measuring string boxes. These were replaced by a Global Positioning System, GPS units, which use satellite data to determine positions on the ground and are carried by field staff workers in the forest. Each new technological advancement opened new possibilities for increasing worker productivity. As each new product was introduced, the previous model became obsolete. This is the essence of creative destruction. Employees are always challenged to stay on top of evolving technologies to extract value from their latest technological introductions. This continuous learning and adaptation drive upward movements on the personal production functions, enhancing both individual and organizational productivity. Whether we talk about the forest management sector or any other industry, it is imperative you identify movements up from one level of your personal production function to the next higher level. A person may be able to perform on the far right side of the personal production function 1 curve only to be surpassed by someone capable of performing at introductory levels in the next level up, or the one higher than that. Progressive adoption of the technology is what makes efficiency valuable to the benefit of the person, the company, and the nation. It can be frustrating for businesses to keep employees on the cutting edge of technology adoption, often referred to as staying on the bleeding edge. As an economist, you can identify how to deploy the right technology for the right job. For example, using the most accurate GPS unit, which costs $10,000 and requires a highly trained technician, may not be justified for a road layout proposed line survey. A $150 GPS unit used for several years can perform the task equally. On the other hand, implementing advanced spatial analysis techniques for a water flow management device costing tens of thousands of dollars may be justified to avoid flooding, washout costs, and the risk posed to people living in the threat zones if incorrect decisions are made. Therefore, knowing which decision is deployed means the manager has an understanding of each level of enhanced technology and is willing to implement it appropriately. Economic growth in the United States has seen significant fluctuations over time. Prior to 1900, growth rates were relatively modest. However, in the 20th century, both firms and the U.S. government invested heavily in research and development, leading to increasing growth rates. From the end of World War II until the mid-1970s, productivity in the United States grew rapidly. This period saw growth rates of 2.3% from 1950 to 1973. However, in the following 2 decades, growth slowed unexpectedly, from 1.3% from 1974 to 1995. In the mid-1990s, the growth rate picked up again, reaching 2.5% from 1996 to 2005. This recovery period was characterized by advancements in technology and increased efficiency in various sectors. Unfortunately, the growth rate declined again from 2006 to 2023, dropping to 1.7%. This period was influenced by significant economic challenges, including the Great Recession and the COVID-19 recession, which thwarted growth despite substantial efforts from the government, educational institutions, and businesses. Some economists argue that the productivity slowed from 1974 to 1995 may not have been a genuine decline, but rather a result of how we measure economic growth. During this period, much of the growth in output shifted from goods to services. Unlike goods, where productivity improvements are easily quantified, services often show quality improvements that are harder to measure. Another perspective is that the U.S. shifted focus towards quality of life issues, including health and safety, environmental regulations, and changes in educational priorities. These factors could have contributed to the appearance of a slowdown in productivity growth. Interestingly, other high-income countries experienced similar slowdowns during this time, indicating that the U.S. was not alone in facing these challenges. This suggests that global economic factors, rather than specific U.S. policies or practices, played a role in the slowdown. Economists have not reached a consensus on the exact causes of productivity slowdown, but the debate highlights the complexities of measuring and interpreting economic growth. The development of new technology has driven significant improvements in labor productivity from 1996 to 2023. Notable examples include faster data processing through advanced computers, enhanced communications via cell phones, and widespread use of the Internet. Some economists argue that the improvements in the quality of services over the last decade and a half have been particularly important. This suggests that GDP growth may have understated the actual growth of the economy. However, it is important to consider that many of these technological gains have been directed towards enhancing consumer products rather than directly improving labor productivity. This raises the question about the sustainability of high productivity growth rates in the future. Economists are divided on this issue. Some believe that the IT revolution, which began in the 1990s, has fundamentally transformed the economy and led to sustained higher productivity growth. These economists highlight that faster data processing and improved communications have had a profound impact on nearly every firm. On the other hand, skeptics argue that the unmeasured benefits from the IT revolution may not be significantly greater than the benefits from previous innovations. They express doubts about the economy's ability to maintain high rates of productivity growth in the long term. In conclusion, while new technologies have undoubtedly driven productivity improvements, the debate continues on whether these gains will lead to sustained economic growth or if we are headed towards another productivity slowdown. The shift from a manufacturing-based economy to a services-based economy has significantly impacted productivity. While this transition is not absolute, it reflects a partial shift in focus. Today, companies often prioritize developing new features for consumer apps on smartphones rather than enhancing data processing capabilities or deploying econometric designs for business productivity. For instance, a high school-aged graduate today is more likely to efficiently find the best route to a concert using a smartphone app than to understand the underlying conditions that make that route the best option. This highlights a growing emphasis on convenience over deeper understanding of processes. Adopting new technology presents a challenge for many, particularly those resistant to change. I've encountered managers of my generation who hesitate to adopt the latest technology even when it is evident that such advancements could improve business operations and profitability. This reluctance to embrace new technologies can hinder productivity. It is crucial for businesses not only to adapt to new tools, but also to understand and leverage their full potential. Navigating successfully in today's economy involves more than just using an app. It requires understanding the procedures and conditions that optimize outcomes. Many organizations often overlook the newest technologies because their management is hesitant to adopt what they do not fully understand. This hesitation filters through the entire organization, creating a culture of stagnation and missed opportunities. When management does not embrace innovation, it sends a message to employees that maintaining the status quo is acceptable. As future economists and leaders, I urge you to challenge this mindset. Think like an economist and critically evaluate the potential benefits and costs of new technologies. Assess their relevance and applicability to your specific context. Understand the underlying principles and procedures to make informed decisions. Remember, the true value of technology lies in its effective implementation. Do not simply follow the path set by others. Equip yourself with the knowledge and skill to understand and leverage new technologies. By doing this, you can drive innovation, increase productivity, and create a competitive advantage for your organization. Take the initiative to learn, adapt, and implement the best options for yourself and your future endeavors. Be proactive in your approach and make informed decisions that will propel you and your organization forward. Think like an economist. The economic growth model tells us that economies grow when the quantity of capital per hour worked increases and when technological change takes place. The profitability of using additional capital, or better technology, is generally greater in a developing country than in a high-income country. The model predicts that poor countries will grow faster than rich countries because the effect of additional capital is greater for countries with smaller capital stocks, and there are greater advances in technology immediately available to poorer countries. This leads to the prediction of catch-up, where the level of GDP per capita, or income per capita, in poorer countries grows faster than in richer countries. However, we observe a paradox. While lower-income industrial countries have been catching up to higher-income industrial countries, developing countries, as a group, have not been catching up to the high-income countries as a group. This is a process of change, and various factors, including political stability, educational infrastructure, and access to technology, influence it. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for predicting and fostering economic growth across different nations. A graph can be used to illustrate whether catch-up is happening. The initial level of GDP per capita is measured along the horizontal axis, and the vertical axis shows the rate at which GDP per capita is growing. Low-income countries should be in the upper left part of this graph, and the high-income countries should be in the lower right side of the graph. Some countries that had low levels of real GDP per capita in the 1960s had lower levels of real GDP per capita in 2010 than in 1960. Other countries that started with low levels of real GDP per capita grew rapidly. Despite the growth in these countries, none have matched the pace set by the United States since 1990. Many economists believe that there are two main reasons for the failure of these countries to catch up with the United States. The greater flexibility of the U.S. labor markets led the U.S. labor market being more flexible, with fewer regulations and constraints on hiring and firing. This flexibility allows for quicker adjustments to economic conditions, leading to more efficient allocation of labor resources. The greater efficiency of the U.S. financial system. The U.S. financial system is more efficient at channeling savings into productive investments. This efficiency supports higher levels of business investment and innovation, which are crucial drivers of economic growth. These factors contribute significantly to the continued dominance of the United States in terms of real GDP per capita compared to other high-income countries. The U.S. labor markets have developed into an efficient system, allowing businesses flexibility to make decisions in their best financial interests. This sometimes means releasing workers to recruit new ones better equipped to implement new technologies, or even to develop them. Other countries have much stronger government involvement in the abilities of companies to make decisions about workers' longevity with a firm and acceptable pay levels. In the USA, workers often enter the workforce sooner, while still in high school, and leave the workforce later, sometimes starting a new career after retiring from another. This flexibility and continuous involvement in the workforce can seem impossible to citizens of other countries who may be accustomed to spending their entire career with the same employer and retiring once and for all. This challenge is not alien to the USA either. A couple of generations ago, my grandfather lived through the Great Depression and worked for one employer his entire career. My father entered as an apprentice program as a machinist for the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, eventually teaching in the Nuclear Reactor Operations Shift Test Engineer program for the U.S. Navy, working for the same employer for 41 years until his retirement. He never re-entered the workforce after that. Today's U.S. workforce is quite different and continues to evolve, demonstrating the dynamic nature of the U.S. labor market, which plays a significant role in why high-income countries are not catching up to the USA. Some poor countries do not experience rapid growth for 4 reasons. First, failure to enforce the rule of law. This refers to the government's ability to enforce the laws of the country, particularly with respect to protecting private property rights and enforcing contracts. When property rights are not secure, individuals and businesses have less incentive to invest and innovate. Second, wars and revolutions. Constant political instability and conflicts disrupt economic activities, destroy infrastructure, and deter investment. Third, poor public education and health. Without a well-educated and healthy workforce, countries cannot effectively utilize new technologies or improve productivity. Investing in human capital is essential for economic growth. Fourth, low rates of saving and investment. Savings provide funds that banks can lend to businesses for investment. In many low-income countries, savings rates are low, which limits the amount of money available for investment in new businesses or infrastructure. By understanding these factors, we can better appreciate the challenges faced by low-income countries and the importance of addressing these issues to promote economic growth. The rule of law may seem like a topic of self-gratification to many American students, as if to say, hey, we figured it out. However, understanding the rule of law is fundamental to our basic business success in the USA. The rule of law refers to the ability of a government to enforce the laws of the country, particularly with respect to protecting private property and enforcing contracts. For entrepreneurs in a market economy to succeed, the government must guarantee property rights. These rights ensure that individuals or firms have the exclusive use of their property, including the right to buy or sell it. Without such guarantees, entrepreneurs would not risk starting a business. An independent court system is also crucial, as it enforces contracts and ensures fair and impartial justice. I want to illustrate this with an example from my experience in Latvia, located along the Baltic Sea in northern Europe. While there, I noticed that everyone had a personal chauffeur. This was not for a status reason, but because no one could leave their automobile unattended without it being stripped and stolen. This lack of enforcement of property rights significantly hinders entrepreneurial activities and economic growth. The topic of international corruption can be illustrated through an interesting case study involving parking tickets in New York City. Delegates from around the world travel to New York to represent their countries at the United Nations. These delegates enjoy diplomatic immunity, meaning they cannot be prosecuted under U.S. law for certain offenses, including parking violations. Two economists took advantage of this unique situation to test the theory of a culture of corruption. They examined the number of parking tickets accumulated by delegates from various countries and compared this data to the perceived level of corruption in those countries. The results were revealing. Delegates from the least corrupt countries tended to follow U.S. parking laws, accumulating few, if any, tickets. In contrast, delegates from the most corrupt countries often ignored parking laws, racking up significant numbers of tickets. This behavior suggests that individuals from countries with cultures of corruption are more likely to flout laws when they believe they can do so without consequences. This case study highlights the broader issues of the rule of law. When laws are not enforced or are routinely ignored, as is often the case in corrupt countries, economic growth and development can be severely hampered. The enforcement of laws, including those that protect private property and uphold contracts, is essential for the success of entrepreneurs and businesses. Without such enforcement, individuals are less likely to invest time and resources into new ventures, stifling economic progress. Understanding the impact of the rule of law on economic growth can help us appreciate the importance of building and maintaining legal systems that support and enforce fair and consistent laws, which in turn fosters a healthy economic environment. Law enforcement was unwilling even to try to prevent automobile theft because it was not their responsibility. Simple protection of a car is one thing, but this hands-off philosophy is extended to the licensed shops in downtown Moscow, Russia, where small businesses were experiencing success and growth. Frustrated by these pesky shop owners' successes, bribes were paid by the big box stores of Moscow to destroy the small businesses taking their business away. Government machines were deployed in downtown Moscow near subway outlets to crush their businesses. Literally, to really crush them. The rule of law is touted as the Russian modus operandi, but in practice, the ruble is the controller in power. This night, over 100 shops were demolished in Moscow. Moscow people woke up in completely different-looking cities. A lot of their favorite shops were destroyed. Never before have Moscow authorities demolished so many shops at once. Usually, they did it one by one after a court order, but now they demolished them at will. No more court orders were needed due to this new law. Thanks to this, they destroyed over 100 stores in one night.
Bulldozers, bailiffs, and police arrive in Moscow's private residential neighborhood of Rychnik on the night of January 21st to enforce a court order by tearing down 43 houses.
They do what they want. The residents were not warned in advance, as the law requires.
The city has declared the region a protected ecological zone. It says the old Soviet land permits for Rychnik residents are invalid and that their houses must be destroyed.
200 people dressed in black arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning. We don't know whether they were police or riot police. They came, some of our residents were standing outside on the road and some were in their cars. Police started taking people into a police bus and sending them to the police station. The others were taken from their cars.
Police arrest around 20 protesters who are brought to the nearest police station overnight for disorderly conduct during the standoff with the bailiffs.
We were asking the policemen why they did detain us. They answered, for property robbery.
Another man was told that he was detained for dealing drugs, and a woman was accused of prostitution.
As police cordon off the area where houses are being demolished, residents can appeal only to reporters and others to save their homes.
The reasons for slow economic growth are as numerous as the countries experiencing it. Military engagements can initiate new technologies, as seen in the USA before the start of World War II. The war was not fought on U.S. soil until Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese military in 1941. For countries like Ukraine being attacked by the Russian Federation or Mozambique engaged in a civil war, technological progression is mostly halted as real estate is destroyed and people are killed. Infrastructure development goes beyond roads and bridges. It encompasses education from grammar school to college, healthcare from people's diets to nations' hospitals, and business success from growing business, expanding employment to all levels of production, assembly lines to R&D. One way for a developing country to break out of the vicious cycle of low savings and investment and low growth is through foreign investment. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, involves the purchase or building by a corporation of a facility in a foreign country. Foreign portfolio investment refers to the purchase by an individual or a firm of stocks or bonds issued in another country. Globalization is the process of countries becoming more open to foreign trade and investment. Developing countries that are more globalized have grown faster than those that are less globalized. A market system cannot work well unless property rights are enforced. Entrepreneurs are unlikely to risk their own funds, and investors are unlikely to lend their funds to entrepreneurs unless property is safe from being arbitrarily seized. In many developing countries, the rule of law and property rights are undetermined by corruption. Research has shown that countries where corruption is most widespread grow much more slowly than countries where corruption is less of a problem. As people's health improves and they become taller, stronger, and less susceptible to disease, they also become more productive. Many economists believe that government subsidies to education have played an important role in promoting economic growth. Rising incomes that result from economic growth can help developing countries deal with brain drain. And brain drain refers to the highly educated and successful individuals leaving developing countries for high-income countries. These countries experience brain drain. Government policies that facilitate access to technology are crucial for low-income countries. The easiest way for developing countries to gain access to technology is through foreign direct investment. In high-income countries, government policies can aid the growth of technology by subsidizing research and development. Governments can increase incentives for firms to engage in investments in physical capital by using investment tax credits. These credits allow firms to deduct from their taxes some fraction of the funds they spent on investment. Analysts are perpetually making projections about the standard of living experienced by other countries. The case of Chinese economic development is no stranger to this scenario. Of course, China's economic development will improve the standards of living for the people of China. Next year will most likely be better for Chinese people than it was this year. The question of the rate of China's economic development challenges the traditional method of measuring it when using the tools created to measure open market economies. These tools were applied to the Soviet Union from 1950 through 1980, with little success, because the Soviet economic system was plagued by corruption and a national ego pivoting on world domination. The Chinese communist system is different. China has endorsed international commercial enterprises and opened its markets to direct foreign investment. China manufactures goods for sale on the world market and is the world's largest exporter. China hosts General Motors, a U.S. mega enterprise, to manufacture automobiles in Chinese plants, employing Chinese laborers and exporting a part of the automobiles it makes, while consuming those new vehicles in China. Understanding how communism is strengthened in China through globalization is a new paradigm to challenge everyone. The arguments against further economic growth tend to be motivated either by concern about the effects of growth on the environment or by concerns about the effects of the globalization process that has accompanied economic growth in recent years. Economic analysis can contribute to the debate over consequences of economic growth, but it cannot resolve the issue. As we conclude this chapter, let's address some common misconceptions that might arise. It's important to understand that while economic growth can lead to increased living standards, its benefits may not always be equally distributed. Globalization, often seen as harmful to domestic economies, actually offers significant opportunities for growth and development. Foreign investment can drive growth, but it needs proper regulation to prevent exploitation and inequality. More capital investment alone does not guarantee growth. Technological progress and human capital development are equally important. While low savings rates can be a challenge, policies encouraging investment and innovation can mitigate this issue. Corruption is indeed a significant barrier to growth. But other factors like infrastructure, education, and healthcare are also crucial. Lastly, high-income countries can still benefit from growth, with emphasis on sustainable and equitable development.